Good evening, everybody. Hope everyone is doing well this evening. Come on in, everybody, come on in. Come on in. Welcome, everybody. Happy Monday. Hope everyone is doing well. All right. Come on in. Yes, that's right. Happy Monday, everybody. Okay, quite a few people in early today. Good. Glad to see that. Well, I want to say good evening, everybody. To everybody that's on the call tonight. Thank you guys for participating in the call. We hope that you have been gaining some valuable insight and some knowledgeable information to help you with your officiating career and how to officiate the games properly according to National Federation and the IHSA. My name is Clarence Cooper. I'm an IHSA basketball clinician. And on tonight, we have our guest speaker, who will be none other than Jeff Rutledge, who's also an IHSA basketball clinician. He will be discussing the topic of foul classification. Before we get into that, though, I want to just kind of remind you guys of a few things real quick. If you haven't registered for IHSA, your officials license, you may want to do that. Again, go to the IHSA website and make sure you take care of that. Complete the harassment, hate speech and harassment video, the concussion video, as well as the concussion exam. All of those things must be completed as well. So make sure that you get that information taken care of if you haven't already done so. Last week, we had TJ Halliday on from the National Federation Committee. He discussed the new 26-27 rules changes and the editorial revisions. We did post that on the IHSA Basketball Officials YouTube channel. So if you are looking for that information to go back and review, you can definitely go there. Again, that's on the YouTube channel. Let me share my screen so you guys can see this information. So on the IHSA Basketball Officials channel, YouTube channel, if you click under here where it says basketball shot clock training, and you click the playlist, you'll see this red video here, which is the rule changes, and then this is the shot clock training video. So for those who need to brush up on both the information for the 2026-27 rule changes as well as the shot clock training information, the video, both of them are there, so you can go and check that out. But again, make sure you visit the IHSA Basketball Officials YouTube channel for any of our previous recordings for our Zoom sessions. All right. Anything else? I'm trying to get all these announcements out the way while I'm thinking about it now. I think that's pretty much it. So without further ado, we'll have our guest speaker, Jeff Rutledge. He's going to come with his presentation of foul classification. Let's give a big round of applause for Jeff and take it away.
Hold on. I need to have the screen.
Oh, okay. Let me stop sharing mine. I'm sorry. Are you good now?
Okay, should do it now.
Yep. There we go.
Okay, can everybody see the screen? You can see the presentation part or the other part?
You see both the next slide and the presentation.
Okay, I want to make sure I'm showing the right screen. This one. Hold on. I have this stuff up.
And while he's getting situated, if you guys have any questions during the presentation, please put them in the chat. We'll answer the questions at the end, at the end of the presentation. But again, make sure that you put your questions in the chat so we can go back and review your questions and try to get them answered for you. All right.
Okay, can you see the presentation? I just want to make sure I'm doing.
Yes, we can see it now.
You can see the presentation now? Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, welcome everybody. This is a presentation we were talking about doing for a little while. It's actually something we don't talk about very often in rules, but we want to cover this because this is something we have noticed in our teachings and our camps, in our, anytime we look at video and people comment on a video or something, we oftentimes have things that are not well understood when it comes to files. Now, this might sound very basic, but there's a little more complex to it if you really do not know the rule. Now, everything I'm going to cover is really out of Rule 4. It's out of Rule 4 and some of Rule 10 and might even be some Rule 8, which involves free throw situations. But those are really the basic rules that are going. And if I've told people this before, if you don't do anything as official or new official, you need to read Rule 4. Rule 4 is going to tell you pretty much everything, and then the other rules where some of that stuff is referenced will be listed and understood. So let's kind of get into it. So this is the basic agenda of what we're going to cover. I'm going to cover what basically there are two categories of files. We're going to cover the definitions of those files. We're going to tell you how to enforce them. We're going to cover the new rules. There's a new rule that kind of applies to this. The shot clock implications, and I'm going to touch on the very last thing really is about flopping. Not going to show any video, but I want to kind of touch on it because it does involve what we do kind of from a file standpoint. So, and again, if there are any questions, please put this in the chat because this will help, and we will kind of get to them to the end. Or if I find that there's a question that's relevant in what we're talking about, because most of what I'm going to cover, if there's a question, I'm probably going to answer your question later on. So this is what's told to me a long time ago, and this actually is really what the rule is and how it makes sense. And I've always thought about this. Every file should be put in one or two categories. Okay. They're either a personal file or they're a technical file. And you might say, Jeff, why does that matter? Because how we adjudicate it, how many free throws we have, what comes to disqualification, all of those things matter. So every file is either a personal file or a technical file. And here's the list basically of what they are. And we'll go into detail with what those actually mean as we come up. So we're going to get pretty basic here. Okay. First of all, what's a common file? Probably you've heard this term multiple times, but you may not know what it means. So basically a common file is a personal file that excludes a flagrant, intentional, simultaneous, multiple file, and also does not apply to a fouled shooter, okay, that is trying a tap or try for goal. So I don't have a lot of video, but some of these will just kind of illustrate the point. So this is just a foul. We have a rebound. It's a foul. And I know the video is a little choppy, so there's a foul that's associated with this. This is a common foul. It might seem self-explanatory, but if you're thinking that it's anything else, it's just a foul that takes place where we don't award a shot. That's basically what it boils down to. So show it again. Just a rebounded foul after the shot by the defensive team who got the ball, and then they're fouled by the team that shot. That's all it is. Okay. So what's a non-common foul? Okay, a non-common foul includes flagrant, intentional, double, simultaneous, multiple, or a player that is fouled in the act of shooting. Okay, so that's basically the two definitions. Learn that and understand it. So this is the key. and the reason the best way to think of this is a common foul is just a foul that we call. The other stuff has its own penalty, has a different penalty that is related to that is not a common foul. So here might be an example of what a non-common foul is like. Now, this is not really a regular shooting foul. We probably should call this something else. And again, we'll get into the definition of it, but this is not considered a shooting foul if we deem this is supposed to be something else other than just a shooting foul. And even if it's a shooting foul, it's still not a common, it's still a non-common foul. So get into the basics. Fouling the shooter is a non-common foul. And part of the way to, as I said, to remember this or to think of this is it has a penalty. So it has a penalty unto itself. A common foul doesn't have a penalty other than you give the ball out of bounds to the offended team. So again, pretty basic. Basically, the shooter is fouled. So by definition, this is a non-common foul. Okay, pretty simple. Okay, so let's get into some of the basics of what this is. So I talked about fouls are put into two categories, personal or technical. So let's get into the personal foul. It's just basically a foul committed by a player that's illegal to an opponent during a live ball. It means during a live ball. This is important, and this is contact that includes a player that is an airborne shooter, or when the ball is dead. Okay, so, and again, we talked about this last week. TJ Halliday talked about this. We no longer have an airborne shooter if I've dunked. So if I've dunked on the ball and if I'm coming down, I'm considered no longer an airborne shooter. So that could be an exception to that, even though that still could be a personal foul based off of what takes place. So the other category is a technical foul. Okay, and a technical foul is simple. Is any foul by a non-player, meaning somebody that's not on the court, okay, even a coach or whatever is considered a non-player at the particular time, or a non-contact unsporting foul by a player, okay? Non-contact, this is important. Unsporting technical fouls include unfair acts or unethical or dishonorable, and they list a few of them that, things like profanity, certain racial, sexual slurs, things that are inappropriate, or doing something that the rules have determined is inappropriate, like maybe pulling your jersey out of your shirt in disgust of an official's call.
Now he has to convert.
This is a technical foul.
He does.
This is the state finals this past year. This is a little choppy. So the players kind of come together. We see the replay of this. Official calls a technical foul on one of the players. So look at this after.
And I get the physicality standpoint from Harlem for one reason. You have a guy in De'Aaron Hill that scored 15 points in the first half. So you're trying to be.
Probably so, but apparently he feels maybe he said something or did something previous that sparked that. Or maybe they called a foul. I think they called a foul first. And then there was some commentary afterwards.
Hill that scored 15 points in the first half. So you're trying to be physical with him.
Took place where there was some commentary. So that's the reason why that's a technical foul. Okay. So why is this important? Because technical fouls can be intentional or flagrant in nature when the ball is dead. Okay. And when an airborne shooter commits a player control foul when the ball is dead, that's the exception to that. So basically, if there's contact, the ball has to be dead for a technical foul to be called. If it's an unsporting act, the ball can be live or dead, depending on the circumstance. So there's different types. I'm not going to get into the details of each of these because these are really something you should study, but we have different classifications of technical fouls: administrative, team technical, substitute, player technical, bench technical. I get into two of them, substitute and bench, but just so you know, administrative for the general part is book stuff, book related, this, that, the other, pregame, things that they're supposed to have in place. Team technical means there are certain technicals like excessive amount of timeouts. If they call them, it is a team technical. Doesn't go to the individual that called it or that tried to call it. A substitute technical, we'll get into that. Player technical, just any player that's on the floor. Bench is any person that's on the bench, including the coach or the head coach. So let's get into why this is sometimes important, and I kind of touched on this. Live ball versus dead ball. This is very important, and this is the part actually we screw up a lot, a ton, okay? Live ball contact and dead ball contact are not treated the same under our rules at all, okay? If you have live or dead ball contact, we got to have a certain kind of foul. We don't have the option. We have to call it this way if it's contact involved. You cannot ever have a tactical foul for live ball contact, okay? Meaning contact, not on sporting act, live ball contact. Fighting is probably the only thing that we could consider maybe during live or dead ball, but fighting has a definition. So when we have a fight or we have something that is considered a fight, it doesn't matter whether it's live or dead ball. That is still a technical foul because it's fighting, okay? And there are some hard, fast rules, and we don't have options of judgment. We just have to determine if that ball is dead or live for the most part, other than fighting, and then we have to make a ruling accordingly. So let's get into it. Live ball is personal fouls only. And then the only way we can call a technical foul is if we have an unsporting act. Okay. And then sporting act means non-contact. I said something. I did something. I hung on the rim. There's all kinds of things that can be considered technical fouls. We need to consider those only live ball, a personal foul, or an unsporting. Dead ball is different. Dead ball has another threshold. The only fouls that we can call during a dead ball for contact is the only ones we call for contact is a tactical foul. And of course, we can have an unsporting act during a dead ball, maybe similar to what we showed on the video. But in order for it to be a foul and a dead ball, it has to be intentional or flagrant in nature. It can't just be they bumped into each other and fell down. Or even they fell down hard and they just bumped into each other. The act has to be something that we consider by rule, intentional or flagrant in nature, the only way we can call it, or it's considered ignored and we consider it incidental contact. So we have to know that. And only technical fouls are called that when it involves contact, that's the only time it can be a technical foul for contact, okay? And I'm going to show some examples of how we screw that up. Okay. So we kind of talked about that there. Just highlights that technical fouls, unsporting can be live or a dead ball, but only contact can be a dead ball technical. Okay. So here's a situation that shows, and I'm going to try to play this through. Hopefully it runs really well, but I'm going to narrate through this. So basically we have a play, okay? This is just highlighting that we're live or dead ball. So it's live. It was dead ball before this. Now it's live. And then we're going to have this play continue. They do the live ball. And watch these two players, okay? Because this is where this is all taking place. So this is a live ball situation. And look what 52 does. Kind of tosses him, okay? But this is all during a live ball. Then they call a foul, and it's dead. But what do you think that they come up and make the decision to do? Now, granted, this is only the last minute of the game. This game's over, or pretty much decided. It's about a 9-point game, okay? So officials call this foul, and then I can get into the mechanics of this and everything, but they call this a technical foul. Now think to yourself, based on what I just said, is that correct? They called a technical foul for this contact, which I'm going to go back to right here. And this was during a live ball. So based on what I said, this can only be a personal foul. Now, is this a common foul or a non-common foul? And I can obviously make a case that this probably is at the very least intentional in nature, maybe flagrant, depending on how the temperature of the game or what you're used to or what has taken place previously, maybe could dictate that. But this can never be a technical foul by rule because this involves contact. Okay? So let's get into some other things. Team foul. This is simple. In high school basketball, pretty much every foul that we call is considered a team foul. Okay? Every one. Except for what we call in indirect technicals. I'll get into that later. But every foul we call personal, technical, are considered team fouls. They go towards the bonus. I want to make that emphasis. So if they go towards the bonus, that we could be in the bonus when a foul is called, but I'll explain how that is done later.
Hey Jeff, real quick, when you're playing your video, can you just mute it? Because when you're talking over it, we can't hear you and the audio from the video, so we can hardly hear you. So just so you know.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I will turn them down. I'll turn them down. Okay. So, all right. Player control foul is just simply a foul committed by a player control. Usually we deem this or think of this in the terms of block charge play, but it's any kind of foul that a player that's in control of the ball or an airborne shooter is considered a player control foul by rule. So it doesn't matter whether it's block charge. It just be something I'm doing. I could throw an elbow or whatever, or push off or something that I'm doing that's illegal while I have the ball would be considered a player control foul. Okay. And team control foul is in the same vein. They put this in several years ago to basically have what we call team control. That means a teammate of the person with the ball basically commits a foul while we're in team control by rule. And remember, we can be in team control during a throw-in. That is actually for foul purposes that applies. It doesn't apply for every situation. But if you commit a foul and you're the teammate while we're in control of the ball, it's considered team control foul. Okay, let me see if I can turn this completely down. Okay. And maybe that could be the problem. So let's watch this. This is just a simple illegal screen. That's all it is. And that's usually what it could be most of the time as a team control foul. But there are some fouls that might be not related to an illegal screen. So we're going to watch this player try to go through the lane, and he gets picked off by the team in control. Foul is called. By definition, this is a team control foul. And this is important because team control, player control fouls, which I talk about later, we don't shoot free throws for those. So you have to know the rules. Doesn't mean that our rule mirrors other levels too. There are some levels that do this a little differently. But anytime we're in team control and we have a foul by that team that's in control of the ball, we don't shoot free throws, no matter what, whether the ball is loose or not. Because team control doesn't change. Okay, so basically what I'm saying here, we never shoot free throws on these. We deem these to be fouls when there's control by a player or team. It is because we do not shoot. And again, airborne shooter is the extension of that for player control. But with a team control foul, if the foul takes place while the team is in control, we don't shoot free throws on these, regardless of whether we're in bonus or not. Okay, so let's get into the nitty gritty of what I touched on this a little bit earlier. Intentional fouls. Intentional foul can be a personal or technical foul. And again, it doesn't matter whether it's predetermined, and it doesn't necessarily base solely on the severity of the contact. It's contact we can consider, but it's not the sole reason. Because these are kind of some of the definitions of that about neutralizing an opponent away from the ball. It's not every situation away from the ball. Contact is not a legitimate play on the ball, things of that nature. Excessive contact, and again, contact with the thrower is another thing. If that happens during that, it is considered an intentional foul by rule. Okay, no matter how they contacted them, they contact the thrower in. It is a violation. It is considered an intentional foul by rule. Now, hopefully this plays really well. But this is an older video with Chicago's own Anthony Davis when he was at Kentucky. Turn that down. So he's grabbed from behind. Now, at the very least, this is an intentional foul at our level. And it doesn't matter intent. I want to make that very clear. Intent is not part of this rule. It's just that it's an upgraded foul. It's a non-common foul. And it's a higher grade foul. So intentional foul is something that is a different type of foul than just a normal shooting foul. And at the very least, that should be intentional. Okay, show it one more time. Okay, just completely just says, no, I'm not going to let him shoot. And just grabs him. That's an intentional foul every time, at the very least. Okay. Now, we have flagrant foul. Now, the reason this is important is because this is the thing that we often mistake at our level. We hear flagrant, and sometimes we get caught up in flagrant 1 or flagrant 2. We don't have a flagrant 1 or flagrant 2 at our level, okay? It is simply an intentional foul or flagrant foul. Flagrant can be personal or tactical in nature, depending on the behavior. If it's unsporting, it could be it's a technical foul. And also, if we have a flagrant foul, we are disqualifying the participant, okay? There's no debate about that, okay? We call a flagrant foul. You use that terminology, you are telling everybody or your partners or the coach that we are ejecting that player and disqualifying them from the game, okay? Or the individual that committed the act. It doesn't have to be a player. It could be a coach. Could be a bench personnel. We are getting rid of them from that contest, okay? So if it's a personal foul, it's not limited to violent contact such as punching, kicking, or kneeing. If it's a technical foul, it's dead ball contact with the behavior is extreme or abusive in nature, okay? And fighting, by definition, is always a flagrant act and a technical foul. Doesn't matter whether it's live or dead. And again, I'm going to get into the definition of this. So this was a situation some years ago. This was a situation some years ago that a flagrant foul was called in a contest. And you don't have to determine whether the player's hurt. You just think that that's just unacceptable. It's unacceptable to the game. And I'll give you a little history. This was a rivalry, and this was a huge rivalry. So there was already tensions in this particular game, but we decided that this was a flagrant foul. Okay, it almost caused a fight. Because if I showed the whole video, you would have saw benches or coaches and whatever coming to the party. Thank God we didn't have kids that came off the bench, but this could have caused a whole lot of problems. So if you deal that this is extreme, this is a flagrant foul. Not a flagrant 2, a flagrant foul. Okay. All right. Now I touched on this. Fighting is a flagrant act, period. And basically this involves attempting, doesn't matter whether they connect or not. They attempt to strike, punch, kick, use their hands, legs, or some way that it's considered a fight. Okay. There are situations where they can do those things and maybe it isn't. But if you think that they're trying to strike that player or try to kick them or something, and whether there's contact or not, is considered a fight, okay? The also other part of this is that if I attempt to initiate things that could be considered fighting, like I talking trash to you, and I do something and your reaction is to punch, strike, kick, or whatever, and you connect or don't, you are considered part of the fight, whether you threw a punch or not. So let me give an example of this, or show an example of this. And this is why these have to be addressed in our game, okay? So watch these 2 players that are highlighted. We probably should have addressed something here before this all took place. But then the players kind of go back at each other. Nothing's happening. No whistle, by the way. Nothing is happening. Now, 13 says, I had enough. Now 13 literally throws a punch. Whether she connects or not is not the point. This is considered a fight on her action. The white player, jersey player, should also be considered a fight because their actions caused it or helped cause it. Not saying they're the sole reason, but they kept going back at each other. And now the fact that they've engaged each other with 13 is throwing punches, that is considered a fight. Now, the two women that are on this court, by the way, are not coaches. They're fans, probably a parent or somebody administrator or something came onto the court and addressed this. They were there before the officials addressed this. And let me also take this a step further. When this game was called or this situation happened, they didn't eject anybody but the two ladies that came onto the court, by the way. This was considered a double foul, okay, which should not have been the case. Anytime somebody throws a punch, we have to consider that a fight. And then we got to consider if the other player that didn't throw the punch is part cause to this. And if they are, get rid of them both. It's a flagrant foul. It's a flagrant act. Okay. And then also keep this in mind, when you have a flagrant act, you have to file a special report. I'll get into that later. Okay. Double fouls. Okay. Double fouls can be personal or technical. Okay. Double fouls are non-common fouls, basically with two opponents happen at the pretty much exactly the same time or nearly the same time. Okay. This is important, and actually it's not as important as it used to be in certain respects. I'll get into that, but it could be a personal foul during a live ball. It could be a dead ball action. And if they're to each other, by definition, this is a double personal or double technical foul. Again, I gave the rule that's in there 419A. Simultaneous foul. This is very interesting. Simultaneous foul is basically not a double foul, but it's fouls that happen approximately the same time. This is very rare. I think I have only had this happen in any game that I've ever been involved in twice. One was a two-man game, two-person game. The other one was a three-person game. It was a varsity game. One was a lower-level game, the two-person game. The varsity game, this happened once, and we couldn't determine which one happened first, so we went with a simultaneous foul. Again, they could be personal or technical in nature when they take place, okay? Multiple foul. What is a multiple foul? Multiple foul is when two or more players foul the same player at basically the same time. Now, I'm going to say this bluntly. I don't say this too often when it comes to rules. This is a rule. You do not want to make this your first choice of anything. This is a rule that you want to make sure that if you ever call this, first off, you better know how to adjudicate it, which I'm going to tell you right now, most of us are not, because there's some specifics. I'm not going to get into all the detail, the weeds of that. But if you call this, basically you got to give two players a foul on the same action, and then you got to award free throws a little differently based off of the action. It can be very complicated. This is one I probably would say to people, you do not want to call. Pick a player, please. Because if you call a double foul, and let's say you gave the first foul to one player and the fifth foul to the other, you think you might have to explain that a little bit? You might. So pick somebody, please. Say the one who hit him the hardest, the one who got him first. However you want to make the decision, please do not go with a multiple foul in the situation. But the rules have it in place for some reason. But I've never seen this happen in a real game in any situation. Okay. So let's get into the other little definitions. A false double foul or a false multiple foul. Now, all a false double foul is one foul takes place, and then there's another foul that takes place by the opponent of the first foul that took place, and then they basically have it's absent of what would normally be a double foul. And basically we're gonna penalize them or adjudicate them in the order in which they took place. That's really all it means. I've heard a lot of people say, I never will call a false double foul. Yeah, you have. If you've been working long enough as a veteran, you called a false double foul probably multiple times in a season and didn't realize that that's what it was called. A false multiple is kind of the same way, but it's the same team committed 2 fouls. And basically one happens before the clock starts, or whatever. Usually a live ball, dead ball. These are basically live ball, dead ball situations. And you called that too, because you called a foul initially, and then you called another foul or maybe a technical foul or something before the clock starts. You've done this. They just have 2 different penalties. It's just basically saying we don't treat them like a double foul in our rules. That's really all that means. So I'm going to show some examples of what this actually looks like. So first player is fouled. Now, it doesn't even matter what we call this foul. But then the player reacts and kicks the player while he's down. So the first foul is a shooting foul. Now, they rule, seems like intentional foul on this at the very least. But then when the player reacts and kicks him, this is a false double foul. This happens actually quite a bit in our game where something is done, they think they just cannot let it go. And then they react. And we've called 2 separate fouls. They each have their own penalty. And because the one was live, we're going to shoot that. And then the one that's dead is a technical foul. We're going to shoot that. Now, it does matter if this player is ejected or not. If you deem that as fighting, which it should be, by the way. And a matter of fact, this I think preceded a brawl. I think this actually was in Indiana several years back and preceded a huge brawl that took place after this because this took place. Because if you show the video, players come to the party, then fans come out of the stands. It got really ugly. So I'll just show this one more time. This is a foul, live ball, airborne shooter, probably intentional. This is either technical foul or a flagrant technical, depending on how you look at it. Okay. This happened this past tournament. Sometimes this is where it happens more often. 22 is called for a foul. 22 is called for a foul, and then 5 takes a little bit of exception. Let me throw it at him. And they gave him with a technical foul. So the first one was live, separate foul, 5 reacts, technical foul. That simple. Okay? That's a false double foul by rule. That's all it is. So you don't call one, you call 2 separate fouls, but the reason we say it's the false because it doesn't apply to a double foul by rule. That's really all that means. Okay? Okay. This is false multiple. So we have a foul called during a live ball on the initial shot or the rebound and shoot shot. And then the player reacts and says something. And actually a teammate reacts. So it's not even the same player that fouled the player. And then as we go, we shoot the free throws. We kind of advance this. Hopefully this plays better. So we have to shoot in the order. And actually part of the mistake of this is shot it out of order, by the way. And the coach is yelling and screaming across the floor and gets a technical foul. So in other words, we have 2 completely different fouls from the initial foul. This could apply to a false multiple. Okay. Now, you can use the terminology if you want to, but just so you know, by rule, these just all have different penalties. And we have to shoot them all in the order or adjudicate them in the order in which they took place. That's really all that means. Okay. This is a college situation. This is actually involving Coach K. So there's a team control foul called. right here, it is a little jumpy. And then after it, during the timeout, it actually took a while during the timeout, and Coach K is talking to the official, or one of the officials, and actually, hard to see, but he tees him up. And that's actually the calling official he's talking to. But then they show the replay, and they're in that first conversation. He tees him up. Okay. So foul on Duke initially. Then the head coach gets another technical foul on top of it, or another foul, not the initial technical foul. 2 different fouls on the team. That is a false multiple. That's all it means. Okay. We're going to apply both rules. We're going to apply both penalties for each foul. Okay. So yes, you've called a false double foul. Guarantee you have. If you have it, you will. Because that's just what they are. You're going to call false multiple. It's just going to happen because somebody's going to react to something and do something inappropriate. Not necessarily a technical foul to you. It could be a technical foul to another player, or they do something to say something to another player that sparks a technical foul. So you have called these. Okay, it just it doesn't happen all the time, but it probably happens a couple times a season in your games. I'm betting money it's happened because coaches get upset or players get upset of fouls we call or how they're fouled or whatever the case may be, and we have to address those. So yes, you called it. Okay, so some other definitions, which I'm going to get more detail in this, of bench technicals, substitute technicals, direct and indirect technicals, because these kind of need to be explained. Okay, all a bench technical is, okay, all a bench technical is a player or somebody on the bench called for a technical. That's all it means. Okay. So if the head coach gets a technical, it's a bench technical. If the assistant gets a bench technical, that's a bench technical. If the player that is sitting on the bench that is not in the game gets a technical, that's a bench technical. The water boy, the scorekeeper, the bus driver, who's ever on that bench, and they get a technical foul, it is considered a bench technical by rule. Now, why is this important? Because if the head coach is given a technical, this is considered a direct technical, okay, to the head coach. It's actually considered a direct technical to anybody else as well. The difference is anytime there's a bench technical that is given, the head coach in high school basketball is responsible. So they cannot, so there's another element to this where a direct technical to another person on the bench, the head coach gets an indirect technical as well. And why is that important? Because any bench technical results in our code, they have to sit, meaning the head coach. The head coach has to sit down if anyone on the bench is given a technical foul. This is big. So, and it goes into a bucket kind of for them. And I'll explain that a little bit. Okay. A substitute technical is just basically someone who's at the bench, or someone at the table, their substitute that come on too early, they do something while they're there that they're not supposed to, that's illegal. It's just considered a substitute technical. Now, by rule, a substitute technical is considered a bench technical. It just is. So if they do something before coming on, the coach can be held responsible for that. Okay. And these are rare. We don't call a lot of these because usually the most issue we may have is players want to come onto the floor probably too quickly. We don't want to get into a habit of just teeing them up just because they do that. Just make sure that they apply the rules. Sometimes they come in because the horn is blown or they think that they're supposed to come onto the court. Now, there are situations that we need to call a technical if they come onto the court. But if they just come maybe a little too soon before we finish reporting or they weren't beckoned, the first instance, in my opinion, do not just give them a technical foul for that. Just make sure that, hey, young man, go back. I'm not done. I need you to stay there. Because they may even come on sometimes when you have multiple free throws, they may think that they're supposed to come on the first time. Just correct it. Usually if you correct it, then you won't have the problem again. But sometimes there's going to always be one time that this is going to happen. Now, I want to get into why this is different. Direct technicals, again, go to the offender, okay? And usually the head coach is the one we usually talk about this, but it actually applies to anybody sitting on the bench, because if they get 2 of them, they are disqualified from the contest, okay? Period. Doesn't matter even if they had 1 during the game and they're on the floor and then they get a bench technical, that is 2. They are now done. We have to file a special report. Indirect technicals are treated a little differently. For there could be 3 technicals to different people on the bench. As I said, the head coach is considered responsible for this. That affects their ability to stay in the contest. So this is why I'm also bringing this up, because the head coach disqualification for indirects is possible. And directs. And basically, it is a combination of 3 things, 3 events. So if they get 1 technical and they are 2 players or 2 individuals on the bench who get a technical, the head coach by rule is disqualified from the contest and has to leave. And unlike a player that gets 2 technicals, the head coach has to leave the visual confines of the floor. They cannot stay. And let me also make this clear. If the head coach is disqualified because they've already lost the coaching box, that does not allow the assistant coach to now have coaching box responsibilities. Once the coaching box responsibilities are eliminated, it's eliminated for the rest of the game for that team, okay, throughout that contest. But the key is they could get a technical. This actually happened to me one time in this unusual way a couple of years ago, okay? So an example, coach gets 1 direct, and then maybe an assistant coach gets 2. That's 3. That means disqualification, okay, for that coach, for the head coach. If the coach gets 2 directs, then it's just like any other player that's on the floor or any player that's eligible to play. They get 2, they're disqualified from the game. And we have to fill out a special report for this. This is not one of these things where it just kind of like happens. Now, this is not the same as a player fouls out with 5 fouls. If we have 5 fouls and one of them is a technical foul, or maybe even the 5th foul that they got was a technical foul, we're not filing a special report for that, because we're not disqualifying them because of the technical. We're disqualifying them because it's the 5th foul. Does that make sense? So this is different. This did happen to me a couple years ago where we gave 2 technicals to an assistant coach directly on the bench, right back to back. And then later on, that head coach got a technical. He was disqualified from the contest. And we had to fill out a special report for it. And matter of fact, it was kind of a mess. We had to talk about other stuff because he did other things. But so just so you know, this is the rare situation that could happen, where they could get 3 indirects or 1 and 2, direct technicals. I've never seen the 3, but I obviously saw the 1 and 2. That did happen. Okay. Now, the enforcement of fouls. Let's kind of get into that, because this is the last really big part that we're going to talk about this when it comes to fouls. Common fouls are always going to be awarded out of bounds to the offended team, unless it's the bonus, okay? So anytime we have a foul, again, not a shooting foul, not a flagrant, not intentional, we're going to give the ball out of bounds to the team that was offended at the spot of the foul. Again, we're going to use our 4 markings in the front court and the back court. So it's outside the 3-point line, the 28-foot mark, inside the 3-point line, the 3-foot mark, or 3 foot away from the lane. Okay. Bonus free throws only applies to a common personal foul. That's it. Okay. Non-common fouls don't get in the bonus. And the reason this is because oftentimes people think, well, wait a minute, that foul put us in the bonus. It doesn't matter. That penalty has its own penalty. So if it's intentional, flagrant, simultaneous, whatever, they have their own penalty. So you have to adjudicate that based on the penalty that you've taken place. Okay. So non-common, we're not shooting bonus for them. We're not shooting bonus and giving them the penalty for whatever for the foul that they committed. Okay. Now, as I said, these are the non-common fouls. So each of these have a penalty unto themselves. So we'll go into each of them for how do we adjudicate these. Only for a shooting foul, this is simple. Only the fouled player can shoot the free throws. That's it. Okay. Unless that player is injured or has blood and cannot continue, or for some reason they're disqualified. They did something after the fact, or something maybe we found out that they were disqualified and we didn't know. That can happen too. And basically at that time, it's only the substitute can shoot if we discover those things. It cannot be anybody on the bench or anybody, or anybody on the floor. Only the person on the bench can come in to shoot that's replacing that person because of these things is the only one that can shoot those free throws. And again, this doesn't apply to other levels. I'm just saying that this is the exception, because you will have coaches think, well, wait a minute, can I pick one of like this kid to play? No, it has to be the substitute. And again, fouls reverting in bonus, if same thing. Okay, shooting, it only can be the player that was fouled, or if there's blood, injury, disqualification, or something that we found out, then that sub is the only one that can shoot. We can't make anybody else shoot the free throw. Double and simultaneous fouls, we don't shoot them. If we determine these are double or simultaneous, we don't ever shoot them, because it basically means they have committed it towards each other. For a double foul or a simultaneous, the foul took place almost the exact same time in different locations. And it's just by rule, we are not shooting the free throws. We are going to go to point of interruption most of the time. I say most of the time because there could be some situations where we call something after. That wouldn't be point of interruption. But in this case, we would go point of interruption anytime that we call these fouls. And I'm going to give a diagram of what this actually kind of looks like. So see where the ball is located. It's in the back court. The down part is the front court. We have a foul that takes place between these two players. But where is the ball located? In the back court. So we're going to put this ball at the 28-foot mark if this is the only fouls that were called during the course of this sequence. Okay, so it's going to go to the 28-foot mark in the backcourt. And again, this has implications for shot clock, and I'll get into that a little later. Here's this example of a simultaneous foul. We just happen to call fouls on these two different places, usually two different officials, by the way, that call simultaneous fouls. Your whistles came almost the exact same time, and you can't determine that one was before the other. If you go with the simultaneous foul, again, I said this only happened twice in my career. But where's the ball located? This would be no different than a double foul. Point of interruption would be the 28-foot mark. Okay? Because of where the ball. If the ball's inside the three-point arc, then it would go to the 3-foot mark. But my point is, the foul location is not important. It's where the ball is located, or where we've determined the ball is when that foul took place. So what does point of interruption just mean? Okay, we resume that the location of the ball was when the foul occurred. Okay, a lot of people think that it's where the spot of the foul. They even say spot of the foul during a double foul. No, it's where the ball is located. Okay, and then only free throws if it occurred before or during free throw attempts. Okay, and also, as I said, alternating possession can sometimes be the point of interruption, but it's just when we do not have team possession, team control, or player control, or something of that nature. If we don't have those things, then we may have to go to alternating possession in some cases. And the best example I can give is a shot. The ball has been released, then the foul happens, and maybe the shot is missed. And then we don't know, we've called the foul, but we don't know where we're going to go with the ball because nobody had possession. That is alternating possession, but that is still point of interruption. And then it also goes where the ball's located at the time of where it happened. So if it's outside the 3-point line, 28-foot mark. Inside the 3-point line, 3-foot mark. It doesn't matter, but we give the alternating possession based off of that. And if the shot is made while we are calling this foul, the team that would get the ball is the team that didn't make the basket. So they would get the end line and be able to run. That is the point of interruption. We do not go to alternating possession in that case, okay? And that trips up a lot of people because we hear people use this interchangeably. Personal, intentional, or flagrant fouls are simple, okay? We're treated identical to free throws and spots. We put the ball on the throw-in where the foul took place, okay? It is always, for the most part, always 2 shots and the ball. Whether the ball went in the basket or not, it's at very least 2 shots in the ball. And it's the spot of the foul where the throw-in takes place. Now, if the offender cannot shoot, they're injured, blood, disqualified, then the sub is the only one that could call it if it's a personal foul, which means it's a live ball. Okay? Only that situation. We can't choose. It can't be anybody that shoots it. And again, this is unlike other levels because I do have coaches sometimes ask, hey, don't I get to pick? Meaning the other coach. They think they get to pick. No, only the substitute. Explain that to them if need be. And again, it is always 2 shots in the ball. Shot goes in or not, except for one time. And this is the rare time, and I've never seen this actually, is if we call an intentional foul or flagrant foul on against the shooter, they're shooting, and we call some action where we think it's intentional or flagrant in nature, and there's a 3-point shot and they miss it, then they get 3 shots. If they make the shot or make the basket, it's only 2. But we never are going to give 1 shot for an intentional and or flagrant foul. That's personal, ever. Okay, so that's the key to that. So people think it doesn't. No, we give them 1, and yes, you're going to have to explain that to coaches when it happens. And this does happen every now and then. This does happen. I've seen it happen quite a few times actually, and it's one that coaches think, oh well, he gets 1 shot, and then shoot the second one, and they're going crazy. So you have to be able to communicate this to them. And sometimes to the players too. Okay. Personal foul, flagrant foul means ejection. There's no debate about that. If we call a flagrant foul, you use that terminology in reporting it, and you've deemed as a crew that this is flagrant, it requires an ejection. There's no flagrant 1 or flagrant 2. Okay. Just so you know, at the other levels, when you hear that flagrant 1, flagrant 2, flagrant 1 is like our intentional foul. So it means similar things. It's actually adjudicated very similar. Flagrant 2 at those levels is their ejection. But in our game, flagrant is ejection. So be careful how you use that term. And yes, we must file a report with the IHSA when that happens. This is not one of the, even if it's their 5th foul, we've ruled a flagrant foul, we have to eject them from the contest or disqualify them from the contest. Now, technical fouls, for the most part, people understand this. If they're singly enforced, okay, it's always going to be 2 shots and the basketball at the division line, okay? The coach or the captain, usually the coach, is the one who decides who shoots them. And it can be a player on the bench. That's why if you're called a technical foul, it's big how you call it. Because if you call it during a live ball and you call a technical foul for contact and you allow 2 shots in the ball, and you allow anybody to shoot, you've misapplied that rule. Matter of fact, you might even affect the outcome of the game in some ways, because here's the other thing. You could eject somebody or disqualify them if it's their 2nd technical foul. So they could have a technical foul somewhere else in the game, and now you've called a technical foul in this situation. You need to know what is a technical foul and what isn't, okay? And again, substitute or anybody can shoot a technical foul, and that's why that is big. And you must know that. Now, TJ talked about this last week. This is actually a very good change. I think this is one of the better changes in some years, is that basically now, because of our new rule, it doesn't matter anymore if we have a double foul or a double technical as much as it used to. Before, the reason that was important, because that was the only time that we could say, okay, they can't shoot. If we had a foul that was 1 foul over here, and then like A did it to one player, the player in front of him, and then B2 comes over and says something, we could not consider that by rule a double foul because it wasn't the same two players at the same time to each other, or even a simultaneous. It does not apply to that anymore. Now it doesn't matter. So if we have two different fouls but one on each team, even if it's a double technical, double personal, whatever, or it's not, as long as they match up in number, we don't shoot the free throws anymore. That's a great change. So now we don't have to play that game, because we used to have these conversations and we would try to say, well, let's make it a double foul, even though it might not even been the same players. I had a lot of officials that would say that, or try to, even though there'd be time and distance, there might be a foul and it might, 20 seconds later at the other end of the court, the kid reacts and does something, and now we consider that a double foul. That is not, but now we don't have to worry about it when it comes to applying the rules, okay? And then obviously if we are not matched up, meaning we have two fouls on one team and one on the other, or 4 on one and 2 on the other, we shoot the part that doesn't offset. So we got 4 on one team, 2 on the other. Let's say we just have a fight or we have something else. We're still going to shoot 4 free throws to the less offended team. Okay. If they're matched, then they wash. Okay. This is a great change. Now we don't have to play that game anymore. And again, it also applies before the contest. They did this I think it was last year or the year before. It's like anytime we have like a dunk, a pregame dunk, or a book issue, if each team had a foul, it applies to that too. So now they've extended that situation to pregame and during the game. Okay. And again, and it doesn't matter if one of the situations is intentional or flagrant or technical and one isn't. Okay. If the penalty is the same, then they could wash. Now, technicals, if we have a personal foul and then a technical, obviously we have to apply the technical, but this is really during a dead ball that we're talking about. So if it's a dead ball, they're technicals anyway. So it doesn't matter if one's flagrant, the other one is intentional, intentional technical intentional foul. Doesn't matter. It's like that. We still would do the same. We're still going to eject the player, by the way, that if they cause a flagrant, but it doesn't apply to how we shoot free throws. And again, this is big because, and this is the last little part that I'm going to talk about. I got one more, that's the flopping. So with the shot clock, we still have to consider where that ball takes place when we call a foul. So for most of those situations, if the foul's in the backcourt and the offense is going to retain the ball in their backcourt, 35 seconds. If it's in the front court, it's either going to be 20 if it was below 20 seconds, or above, it would stay the same unless, especially on doubles, when we have double situations, that's really when this is invoked. And again, if, simultaneous or double, it doesn't matter where the shot clock is, the shot clock would stay the same. Okay, so that means if it's 5 seconds on the clock, when this happened, it's 5 seconds on the clock is going to stay on the shot clock. We do not reset it because we're giving it to the offense. It's not a new situation. It's point of interruption. So we're giving the ball to the same team, but we're going to give them the same set of circumstances before that foul was called. They don't get a reset. Okay. And this is the last part. No video with this, but I want to address this because this comes up a lot. Well, first of all, in flopping, we have a warning. So whenever we rule a flop, the first one to that team is a warning. Okay. So they get a pass on the first one. I would say this, don't nitpick them, but we need to call more of these, because one of the reasons kids keep doing this stuff is because we never penalize it or never make a point to penalize it. So flopping, faking, being fouled can involve some contact. It absolutely can. If it's considered incidental and they embellish that contact, we can call a flop. Okay. And yes, and usually when we see this a lot is shooters. Shooters often fall. Now, use some common sense too with shooters, because sometimes they're off balance. They're trying to do something. They may even be trying to cause a little bit of contact, but they miss or they don't or it doesn't cause an illegal contact of any kind, they may just be in bad shooting form. I'm not going to call a flop just because they're in bad shooting form. But if I feel they totally embellished everything, yelled and screamed or did something, yes, call a flop on shooter. That's the one that we need to call more of. Now, when Gary was the head clinician, he used to tell us all the time, we got block charge where we got a flop possibly, and there's some contact, put a block on it. Just get them. And actually the foul is actually more punitive than the violation unless we call a technical foul. If we call the warning, then basically they got away with it. If we call the foul, they did it. Now, again, this takes some judgment and some seeing plays over and over again. There might be a little bit of contact. It may be enough. Also, I can run you over and still embellish. So if I get run over and I embellish, if the contact was illegal, call the illegal contact. Don't penalize both. Don't call a flop and then say, well, you embellish, or it was a charge, but you embellish, so I'm going to call flop too. Pick one, okay? And the best way I can say on block charge plays, if the contact is like a 3 or 4 in nature and they act like it's a 10 or 11, then that's probably where we need to start thinking about what we're going to do with that particular contact. And again, we do not call this enough at all. And I'm going to say this because this rule came from the college level. Let me tell you right now, we used to call the mess out of these. We called so many, it got to the point where it was like, okay, we just called everything. And you know what eventually happened? They stopped doing it. So that's the reason why we probably got to start addressing these, because if they stop doing it, then we don't have to worry about it. But if we have things like head bobs or this, that, the other, if we don't call it, at the very least, go talk to them. I've told players all the time, knock off the head antics. Stop. And they'd be like, what is it? I said, first off, he made contact with your body. And this is what I will say. This has helped me get out of it. Every time you do that, I'm going to think he better knock your behind out before I call a foul. And you know what they do? They stop doing it. So then I don't have to worry about it anymore. Okay? The yelling, the screaming, things like that. Tell them to knock that crap off, especially if you're not going to call a flop. Now, again, I'm not saying go call 10 of these a game. I'm saying address them when you need to, use good preventive officiating to get them. But we need to call more of these. And we'll talk about this later in these meetings as we go on. Any questions, comments, problems, complaints, or concerns at this particular time?
Yeah, so we do have some questions in the chat. I want to kind of go with them in the order that they were entered. So Brock, if you're on here, can you ask your question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I think what I put, it was way back when we were talking about.
Yeah, you said does it add to a total team foul count for team control fouls?
Yes.
You would not shoot free throws.
Right. So like it was like maybe like a moving screen on the offense. Would that add, if they're at 4 fouls, does that put them to 5 fouls, but then they still wouldn't shoot free throws? I'm just saying, how does it work with their total team foul count, if at all?
It adds to their team count, but we aren't going to shoot a foul or a bonus because the foul is considered non-common, and the penalty for that is we just take the ball away from them, but we add the foul. So yes, the 5th foul could be a team control or a player control foul. Just remember, we're never shooting free throws on those kind of fouls.
Okay.
Okay. If you deem it's not, meaning intentional or flagrant, that has its own penalty. So we're not adding a penalty to what they do because it's the bonus. The penalty for those are 2 shots in the ball, intentional, flagrant, whatever the case may be, double personals. They have their own penalty. So we're not adding the bonus on top of that. Just use the next foul that is a common foul, or even not a shooting foul. The next foul would be considered the bonus or shooting bonus.
Okay, thank you.
Hey Jeff, can you go back to the beginning of your slide when you had the different rules, locations in the rule book, so people can, because I know some people came on late. So if you can go back to that and just maybe share that slide so people can have a reference point to go and research this information. And while you're doing that,
okay. Can you see
Yeah, I can
Just
see
I
the
just want to make sure you can see the screen.
yeah. Just go back to the different rules so people can know where they can find the information in the rule book. And by the way,
Actually, guys, all of these are in Rule 4. It's under fouls, and each of these are explained. Now, Rule 10 has rules about the different type of technical fouls and things of that nature. But pretty much, these are in Rule 4. They're explained by definition in rules. Talk about this, because that was the only reference. But they're all in Rule 4. They basically say that they even tell you like an intentional foul can be a personal or technical foul. A flagrant foul can be personal. They each have their definition. I gave every definition. They're all in Rule 4. I think it's Rule 419, if I'm not mistaken, right off the bat.
great.
And then in Rule 10 explains the player, administrative, team,
The fouls,
bench technical, that kind of thing. That's in Rule
right.
10.
So Rule 10 is fouls and penalties. So Rule 4 will give you Rule 4 is all definitions. Rule 10 explains the fouls and penalties based on the various situations that he's discussed in the presentation. So
And Rule 8 covers who shoots free throws for those particular type of situations.
correct.
And then I think Rule 7 talks about where we put the ball in play if these fouls take place.
So in other words, there's a lot of connecting from different different rules. You have to kind of connect the dots to figure out the solution to various scenarios that he kind of explained in this presentation. Next question came from RJ Harrington. RJ, if you want to unmute, feel free to unmute. Generally speaking, are false multiples due to two or more officials calling fouls on the same play?
So if two officials call foul on the same play, is that what we're asking? I just want to make sure I understood. I didn't hear the first part of the question.
It's generally speaking, are false multiples, meaning false multiple fouls, is that due to two or more officials calling fouls on the same play?
It could, and that's probably where the simultaneous foul is more likely, because it would be two different areas. I don't know that one official would have the wherewithal to call two different fouls in two different places. But when I had it happen in my game, it was two different officials. It was literally one place on the floor, another place on the floor. And when we talked about it, we could not determine which one happened. We actually were trying to argue for our foul. And then we said, okay, this is a simultaneous foul. And that's the only time it's ever happened. Now, the double foul, most of the time is going to be the single official because you saw the whole play. But there are situations where one official might see one thing, the other official might see something else, and then you determine basically they fouled each other at the same time. So you could have a double foul in those situations, but that's very rare. I may have only had that happen a couple times in my career. And when I say a couple times, guys, I'm talking about 30 years. So when you're talking about, these are not things that happen on a regular basis, but this is why when you blow your whistle and you have a whistle with your partner, talk about it. Make sure you know what you're calling or what you're going to say, because also you will have a coach that will say, well, Big kid did this, that kid did that. So you want to know if you have a double versus a singular or simultaneous or a live ball, dead ball, tactical, personal foul, tactical. You want to know that, because that could be where those fouls could be two different individuals.
Yeah, I'll say this also, like just to reiterate what Jeff's saying, just remember whatever you call, you got to be able to explain to a coach or a player or even your partners. So make sure that you get a full understanding, study the rules, like know it like the back of your hand. So that way, when you do have to address these different situations, your explanation matches, what's going on and and the consequence of what you're calling. All right. Next question is from Alicia. It says indirect technicals aren't team fouls, but direct technicals are team fouls, correct?
Yes. Indirect just applies to, it's a penalty to the coach, basically. Penalty to the head coach. They lose the box if there's any bench technical, whether they got one or they didn't. If they didn't get the technical, it was one of their bench personnel that got the technical. It's an indirect to the coach. It's a kind of a double penalty for the head coach, but indirects never apply to team control. That's the only foul that does not apply to the team foul count.
Correct. All right. John has a question. He says, what is the correct mechanic when administering a flop?
The correct mechanic is, if you have a warning, I believe you just simply stop the clock and then you're supposed to give the flop signal one time. Now, there's some debate about that from best practices, because usually the one time, if you do it, you have to be seen because you could be allowing play to continue. So really, you're supposed to give it one time. I personally feel like at least twice makes sense. But I'm going to say that as a personal feeling, not necessarily the stance of the IHSA or the National Federation, because the National Federation was pretty clear they wanted it one time. But I think you have to, part of it is also you want your partners to see it. You want everybody to know that's what I'm ruling. And maybe I'm continuing play. And then after it's all said and done, stop the clock. Then we're going to say flop warning. That's when really you give it one time and go to the table and report the number 13 flop warning. Okay. Obviously, if this is a technical foul, this is simple. Then we're going to blow a whistle. If they've had a warning, then we're going to blow a whistle, and then we're going to give the technical foul signal. And then obviously we got to report that to the individual. Now, if I did not say this in the presentation, it is not an individual technical foul. This is a team technical foul. So the warning is a team warning. So if 13 does it in the first half and 23 does it later on in the game, we're not penalizing an individual. They're not getting fouls that are going toward their disqualification. This is a team X. So it could happen 10 times in a game. Hopefully it doesn't happen 10 times in a season, but if it happens 10 times in a game, we're not giving it to somebody similar to a team technical for excessive timeout or 6 on the floor. It's exactly the same logic.
Okay. Clifford, you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, I'll do that. When we was watching that video of that young man committed that intentional foul, and then the other young man reacted by kicking him, and that's a flagrant. So would you kick out both players?
Well, it depends on what you rule. Definitely the kicking action to me is flagrant. That fits flagrant, whether it's personal or technical. It's a technical foul, it's a dead ball. So the first one, I don't know that necessarily you would, unless you felt there was just something going on in that game, or you felt that was just too extreme. You could eject both of them, but you don't have to. You just know that it's an option. And I would say this: if this happens in my game, and I'm with Clarence and Tracy, we're having a conversation, and the conversation might be, "Hey, do you think we need to eject that player?" And we probably will come to that conclusion. But if you decide not to, that's fine. But the kicking is definitely, to me, a flagrant act, is a technical foul, and I'm dumping him at the very least. But it might not be a bad idea to eject both of them. And then I would also say this too, guys, if you have some stuff that's been, like, let's say that was the third or fourth incident in your game, talking trash, whatever. Yeah, I'm probably ejecting that initial player.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely want to get control of your games. You don't want your games to get out of control. And, there's a saying that players play better with 4 fouls. So and not that you're intentionally trying to give players fouls, but if that's what you got to do to keep your game clean, then you may have to, put some whistles on the plays if they're getting a little out of hand. So,
and if you got to be the bad guy to eject player, trust me, I just say most of your signers are going to support that. I have no problem with that play being an ejection. Just understand it doesn't have to be. It's not the instigator rule the same way that the other rule with fighting. That act was unto itself. That was part of a live ball act. So.
And while we're talking about that, if you do happen to have, and this is especially good for those that are not familiar, or since the IHSA does have a new official center website for those that don't know, this is the what it kind of looks like once you log in. So you see here on the left-hand side are your different links that you can click on. If you have a report that you have to do or that you have to submit to the IHSA, you will click on reporting. You make sure it's on special report, and then you have to select the sport. Now, this is where it may get a little confusing because they got abbreviations here, and I don't know if you guys can see this. Let me see if I can maybe try to zoom in a little
You can
bit.
see it.
You can see it. Yeah, I'll just zoom in a little bit just so you can see. So here is BKB stands for boys basketball, and BKG stands for girls basketball. Okay, so just know that, you know, if you're doing a boys game, you have to fill out a special report for ejection, or maybe something happened, a player got a concussion, or anything like that. You click either one. For boys basketball here for BKB, and BKG is for girls basketball. So I'll just click on this just so you can kind of see what it looks like. You click on the sport that you're looking for, and you click submit report. Now for basketball, it's a little more detailed. Again, so it says here a special report should be filed immediately for every unsportsmanlike conduct ejection, but not, and I emphasize, but not for a simple disqualification such as 5 personal fouls in a game. Okay, so basically any ejections, conduct, unsportsmanlike conduct, harassment, and I had a situation this past season, one of my schools that I assigned, some reason or another, they had a real bad pipe burst in the gym. Again, that's a special report that you have to fill out. So you have to document that information, let your assigners know, so that information can be documented and reported to the IHSA. Please know this: anything that you put in this report can potentially be used in a legal battle, in a court case. Okay, if it goes to that point, because you'd be surprised, there are a lot of people out here, suing officials and suing schools and athletic directors and coaches or whatever. So make sure whatever information you put in your special report is factual, based on your perspective. Okay, it's not based on, oh well, Jeff was on the other end and I was working with Jeff and Jeff said this happened, that happened. No, Jeff is going to write his report based on what he saw. I'm going to write my report on what I saw. Okay, if we're in the crew together. All right, but again, you just filling out the date. You're selecting the sport. Okay, again, you find boys basketball, girls basketball in this case, since we're talking basketball. Same thing if you do any other sports. This is a special report that you would fill out, but this particular one is for basketball. You're going to select if it's varsity, junior varsity. Let me make it a little bigger. Varsity, junior varsity, sophomore, freshman. The name of the person being reported. So now this is why it's important to make sure you check the scorebook before the game begins, because we need to make sure that the names are accurate in the scorebook with the correct uniform numbers. Okay, because if we have to document anything, we want to make sure we get the correct information, the person's school, opposing school in the contest, and then you have to select one of these reasons for your special report: player ejection, coach ejection, fan ejection, possible concussion, missing AED defibrillator. Again, this is why we have this conversation during our pregame coaches and captains speech, asking the coaches, hey, or the home coach, do you have an AED machine and where is it located? That has to be asked. The IHSA and the state of Illinois requires us to ask that question at our pregame events, our contests. Okay. Is it because of hate speech, harassment ejection by a player, coach, or fan? Hate speech or harassment report, but no ejection, or other. Okay, and like I said, when I had the situation where the pipe burst in the gym and water was all over the place, they had to reschedule the game. That was the other situation. So it could be anything other than that would cause a report to be filed. And here is the description of the incident. Again, it says, please use as much detail necessary to describe the incident. So you want to describe it as detailed as possible. And again, once you finish this report, and you can document it, say like in a Microsoft Word document, to get your thoughts out and make sure everything is, accurate and spelled correctly, what have you, copy and paste it and put it in here if you want to do it that way, or using Google Docs or whatever platform or word processing platform you want to use. But make sure you put that in here, make sure it's accurate. Now, here's the most important part to this report. When you hit the submit report button, immediately a copy is going to go to the school that you selected up here. Okay, it's going to go to the school principal, and it's going to go to the IHSA office directly. So both will get a copy. So don't think that, oh, well, I'm going to, report this coach for harassment, and don't think that the school won't find out. As soon as you hit the report button, a copy of the report goes to the school principal as well as to the IHSA. Okay, so they will contact you. The IHSA will contact you, especially about stuff like this, because again, we kind of live in a society where a lot of folks like to want to try to sue. Not saying it happens all the time, but it does happen. Okay, and so we want to make sure we protect ourselves by making sure whatever we put in this document is factual based on what we saw and what we.
And let me say this, Clarence, too.
Mhm.
This report is not for your feelings. Like, don't say that they said bad language, or I didn't think it was inappropriate. Use the language they used, or use the act that they used. Okay. So if they use a specific word or words, put that in the document that that's what was said. Because then if you say they just use vulgar wording, that's when the IHSA is going to contact you. They're going to be, well, what does that mean? Like, and some people have different beliefs on what is vulgar and what is inappropriate. So, and also include the rule. So if you rejected them based off of it's a bench technical and under rule 10.4, they use inappropriate language, but say what the inappropriate language is, use the rule that backs it up. And don't talk about I felt the game was getting out of hand and we had to do something. No, just address the issue. If you called it flagrant foul, talk about the flagrant foul. Don't talk about the other things, unless maybe you want to give context to say we had given previous technical fouls. The other last thing, I don't want to keep you too long with this one. If there are multiple ejections and different officials saw the ejection, this is not for the crew chief to fill out 2 or 3 ejection forms. You have to fill out the form for what you saw and what you made a ruling on. And I'll give you a quick example. At a fight years ago where I called a foul and a kid kicked the kid at a reaction. And then another kid came to the reaction and pushed the kid that originally fouled the kid. That's what happened. I just saw those 2 things. When we got together as a crew, one of my partners saw a kid come off the bench. I filed the report for the 3 kids because I witnessed that. My partner called the one for the kid that came off the bench that required a disqualification. That's how it should be done. Do not say, well, Clarence, you the crew chief, so you file it all. Because what if Clarence didn't see any of this? Clarence might not have known what exactly happened. He's basically going by what you told him. He might not have witnessed it. So it's only the person that is making the ruling and witnessed the act as the one who fills out the report. If both of you are, or 2 or 3 of you saw it, okay, then maybe you choose who wants to fill out the report. But this is not something that you share the information and give it to somebody else so they can file the report. Because what if they put something in there incorrect? Now you all are on the time for basically, well, wait a minute. Well, Jeff, why you ejected him? Why did Clarence fill out the report? Clarence, why'd you fill out the report? You didn't see what happened. That's not what the video showed. This is why you do that.
And that's what I was going to say. Just make sure whatever you put in that report, there are cameras everywhere, people recording stuff, posting it on social media. You want your information to be as factual to what actually happened as possible, or what you saw or what you heard. Don't make up stuff. Don't ad lib. Don't say, I think, I'm not sure. Only put factual stuff that you are aware of. If you don't know, hey, do your special report. I don't know, but Jeff ejected this player. I didn't see what happened, but you need to write, because what's going to happen is, and this happened to me, the IHSA will contact you probably within 24 hours to verify, hey, Clarence, you submitted a report. You said you didn't know what happened. Are you sure? Now that you've had a little extra time to think about it, maybe you forgot something, or, you've had a little time to think about it. Is there something you need to update in your report? Because we got Jeff's report, and Jeff said he ejected 3 players. But you said you didn't see anything. Like, are you sure? Like, so my point is, just make sure that your information is factual. Okay. And
let me also say the one last thing about this too. They may not contact you. That it is not for you to know what their penalty that the state gave or whatever. For normal ejections, it's they got to miss the next game at the contest that they left. So if you have a freshman game and they play varsity, they have to wait till the next sophomore game or that was played, a freshman game that was played before. They may not tell you this, and that's okay. The fact is that you filled out the report is part of your due diligence. If they need further information, they will contact you, and it's no guarantee. I've even had a principal contact me one time after an ejection in another sport. Literally the next morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call because the principal was trying to figure out, is this somebody we need to keep on and his behavior and this, that, the other. But that's not guaranteed. And in a lot of them there, you have no clue other than maybe the paper posting it and saying so-and-so coach got ejected and they cannot participate in that game. But it's not your business what happens to them.
Correct. So with that being said, we're going to wrap up our meeting. We'll stick around in case somebody else has a couple of questions afterwards, but we don't want to hold everybody too long. But thank you guys for being on the call. Next week, we do have another guest speaker. We highly encourage you to come. She was actually one of our top speakers last year. Her name is Charlene Shepard. She'll be talking about offense-initiated contact. So again, make sure you're here next week. We'll send out the Zoom reminders, so check your email. Again, invite other basketball officials to participate. We really appreciate you guys being on the call with us. Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll post this video on the YouTube channel again with the rest of the videos. And if you check the chat, I put the link from last week's video with the NFHS rule changes by TJ Holiday. Jeff and I did update the 26-27 IHSA shot clock video training overview. So if you want to go back and look at the updated rules and things in there, you can check that out. And we also have a condensed shot clock chart, information chart that you can look at, kind of like a cheat sheet, so to speak, so you can understand when the resets take place and no resets and things like that. So once again, thank you guys for being on the call. We hope that you guys have a great evening, and we look forward to see you next week when we have our guest Charlene Shepard talking about offensive initiated contact. Have a great evening, everybody.
Thanks, Clarence.
Guys, we'll stick around and answer a couple of these questions that I see a lot of people asked. I'm sorry I did not see them during the course of the content, but I'll answer them if you want to